Bullies don't realize that the new kid is a karate expert. Principal Walter Dawson's hand trembled as he set down his coffee mug, the dark liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Another incident report lay on his desk, the third one this week. He rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of Blackwood High's deteriorating atmosphere pressing down on him like a physical force. They cornered Jimmy Winters in the bathroom, Vice Principal Torres said, her voice tight with frustration. The poor kid had to get 3 stitches after they slammed his head into the paper towel dispenser. Dawson closed his eyes. And let me guess, no witnesses? None willing to speak up, Torres confirmed. Troy Matthews and his crew have half the school terrified and the other half either paying for protection or trying to join them. Outside the window of his office, Dawson could see students hurrying across the courtyard, eyes down, moving in protective clusters. Blackwood High had once been his pride, a school with strong academics and stronger community spirit. Now it resembled a prison yard more than an educational institution. "What about the teachers?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Mr. Klein tried to intervene last week when they were harassing that freshman girl. They slashed his tires in the parking lot. Left a note saying "mind your business" on his windshield. Torres sighed. Most of the faculty are just trying to keep their heads down now. The intercom buzzed, and his secretary's voice filtered through. "Principal Dawson? Troy Matthews' father is on line 1. He's threatening to call his lawyer about the unfair targeting of his son." Dawson exchanged a weary look with Torres. Troy's father was a prominent local attorney who had made it abundantly clear that his son was untouchable. Every attempt at conventional discipline had been met with legal threats and board pressure. "Tell him I'll call him back," Dawson said, then clicked off the intercom. He stood up and walked to the window, watching as a familiar scene unfolded in the courtyard. Troy and his 4 lieutenants, Derek, Mason, Luke, and Vince, had surrounded a sophomore carrying a violin case. Even from this distance, Dawson could see the terror on the younger student's face as Troy plucked the case from his hands and held it high overhead, just out of reach. "Detention doesn't work. Suspension is a vacation to them. Their parents either don't care or actively block our efforts," Dawson said, his voice hardening. "I've tried everything by the book, and the book has failed these kids." Torres looked at him with surprise. "Walter, what are you thinking?" Dawson turned from the window, his face set in determination. "Remember that educational conference I attended last month in Sacramento? The one about alternative disciplinary approaches?" "Yes. I met someone there, a principal from Chicago who had a similar situation. He told me about an unconventional experiment they tried." Dawson pulled open his desk drawer and extracted a thin file. "I've been sitting on this idea for weeks, but I think we're out of conventional options." He handed the file to Torres, who flipped it open. Her eyebrows rose as she scanned the contents. "You can't be serious," she said. "This is unorthodox." "So is having a student population living in fear," Dawson countered. "So is watching teachers unable to teach because they're too busy managing chaos." The file contained a single photograph of a teenage boy with calm, thoughtful eyes and an unassuming smile. Attached was a remarkable resume of martial arts championships and community service awards. "His name is Ryan Carter," Dawson explained. 17 years old. 5th degree black belt in Kenpo Karate. 3-time junior national champion. He's also maintained a 4.0 GPA while helping in his family's dojo. His sensei is an old friend of mine from college. And you want to bring him here, why? As some kind of security enforcer? Torres asked skeptically. No, Dawson shook his head. As a student. A transfer. No one would know his background, not the teachers, not the counselors, and especially not the students. He'd come in looking like any other new kid. Understanding dawned on Torres' face. You want to set a trap for Troy and his gang. I want to create a controlled situation where they face natural consequences for their actions. Dawson corrected. Ryan wouldn't hurt them, that's not what martial arts is about. But he wouldn't be intimidated either. And when they inevitably target him, They'll get more than they bargained for, Torres finished. Exactly. Sometimes the only thing that can challenge a bully is someone who isn't afraid of them, someone who can stand their ground without stooping to their level. Torres looked concerned. The board would never approve this. Which is why the board doesn't need to know the specifics, Dawson replied. All they need to know is that we're accepting a transfer student. The rest is between Ryan, his parents, his sensei, and us. Outside, cruel laughter erupted as Troy dangled the violin case over a drainage grate, threatening to drop it while his friends held the struggling owner back. Dawson's jaw tightened. What about Ryan's parents? They're okay with using their son as, what, bully bait? His father was the one who suggested it, Dawson said quietly. After Ryan helped a similar situation at his previous school. His parents believe strongly in using their martial arts training for protection and justice, not just for themselves, but for others who can't defend themselves. Torres was silent for a long moment, watching the scene in the courtyard with growing anger. Finally, she nodded. Okay. When would he start? Next Monday, Dawson said, reaching for his phone. I'll make the final arrangements. As he dialed, movement in the courtyard caught his attention. Troy had released the violin case, but not before removing the instrument and holding it precariously by its neck. His face wore the cruel smile that had become his trademark at Blackwood, the look of someone who knew they were untouchable. We need this to work, Dawson said grimly as the phone rang. For all their sakes. Even Troy's? Torres asked. Especially Troy's, Dawson replied. That boy is headed for a life that ends behind bars if someone doesn't redirect him soon. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to show them they're not as powerful as they think. The phone connected, and a calm voice answered. Dawson straightened his shoulders. Mr. Carter? It's Principal Dawson from Blackwood High. We spoke last week. Yes, I've made my decision. We'd like Ryan to start on Monday. He paused, listening. No, none of the staff will know his background. As far as anyone will be concerned, he's just a new transfer student. Yes, I understand the risks. And I'm prepared to take full responsibility. Dawson's eyes drifted back to the courtyard, where Troy was now using the violin bow like a sword, mock fencing while his victim watched in helpless anguish. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I believe this arrangement will benefit everyone involved, even if some of them won't appreciate it at first. As he hung up the phone, a rare smile crossed Dawson's face. For the first time in months, he felt something like hope for his school. Operation New Kid begins Monday, he said to Torres. Let's just hope it works. Ryan Carter adjusted his glasses, non-prescription lenses in cheap plastic frames, and hunched his shoulders slightly as he walked through Blackwood High's main entrance. The carefully cultivated posture made him look smaller than his actual 5'10" frame. His father's words echoed in his mind. Remember, underestimation is your greatest advantage. Principal Dawson had briefed him thoroughly. Troy Matthews and his gang controlled the school through fear and intimidation. Ryan's job wasn't to confront them directly but to observe and document their behavior while presenting himself as an unassuming target. Only Dawson and Vice Principal Torres knew his true background. New kid at 2 o'clock, a voice whispered as Ryan navigated the crowded hallway. He pretended not to notice the sudden attention, focusing instead on the schedule in his hands. His fingers, calloused from years of breaking boards and striking training dummies, trembled slightly, not from fear but from the effort of restraining his natural confident posture. Yo, Four Eyes! Ryan looked up with practiced hesitation. A tall student with styled hair and an expensive leather jacket leaned against a row of lockers, surrounded by 4 others who wore matching smirks. Troy Matthews. Ryan recognized him instantly from the photos Dawson had shown him. You lost? Troy asked, his voice dripping with mock concern. Just looking for room 203. Ryan mumbled, pushing his glasses up his nose. Troy exchanged amused glances with his friends. Derek, don't we have a welcoming committee for new students? A broad-shouldered boy with a crew cut stepped forward, cracking his knuckles theatrically. Sure do, Troy. Ryan noticed how the hallway had subtly cleared, students pressing themselves against lockers or finding urgent reasons to head in other directions. No one wanted to be caught in Troy's orbit. "First day special," Troy announced, snatching Ryan's schedule. "We give you a tour of the school's most exclusive locations." Ryan allowed a flicker of worry to cross his face. "I don't want to be late for class." This elicited laughter from the group. Mason, a lanky boy with a scar above his eyebrow, clapped a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Don't worry about that. We'll write you a note." "Actually," Ryan said, reaching for his schedule, "I should really." Troy held the paper higher. "What's your name, kid?" "Ryan Carter." "Well, Ryan Carter, let me explain how things work at Blackwood." Troy took a step closer, invading Ryan's personal space. "Some people matter. Some don't. We decide who falls into which category." Ryan's training had taught him to read body language with precision. Troy's stance, the tilt of his chin, the way his weight shifted slightly forward, all telegraphed his next move before he made it. When Troy's hand shot out to shove Ryan's shoulder, it took significantly more effort to allow the push to connect than it would have to avoid it. Ryan stumbled back dramatically, bumping into Vince, who spun him around and pushed him toward Luke. For 30 seconds they bounced in between them like a human pinball, laughing as Ryan's backpack fell and his glasses went askew. "Pathetic," Troy sneered when they finally let Ryan collapse against a locker, breathing hard. "This one's definitely going to be fun." Ryan said nothing, simply gathering his scattered belongings. The calculated silence only intensified their amusement. "See you at lunch, Carter," Troy called as they sauntered away. "Save us a seat." When they disappeared around the corner, Ryan straightened his glasses and took a deep breath. A girl with curly hair who had been watching from nearby approached cautiously. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm Mia. Those guys are the worst." "I'm fine," Ryan said with a small smile. "Just not the welcome I was expecting." "You should report them," Mia suggested, helping him collect the last of his papers. Ryan shook his head. "I don't think that would help." "It wouldn't," she agreed sadly. "Nothing does." Throughout the day, Ryan maintained his cover flawlessly. In classes, he gave correct but unremarkable answers. In the hallways, he navigated with deliberate awkwardness. And at lunch, when Troy and his friends commandeered his table and dumped his food in his lap, he reacted with defeated resignation rather than anger. After school, he slipped into Principal Dawson's office through a side entrance to avoid being seen. "They've already singled me out," Ryan reported, dropping the timid act completely. His posture straightened, his voice gained confidence, and he removed the fake glasses. "Classic pack behavior, establishing dominance through coordinated intimidation." "Were you hurt?" Dawson asked with concern. "No," Ryan smiled slightly. "Though I'll need to replace this shirt." He gestured to the ketchup stain on his chest. "They're exactly as you described them, skilled at staying just below the threshold of expellable offenses while creating maximum psychological impact." "And the other students?" "Terrified," Ryan said. "But I've identified a few who might become allies. A girl named Mia showed kindness after my first encounter with Troy." Dawson nodded. "Torres mentioned her. She's tried standing up to them before, but after they spread rumors about her last year, she's been more cautious." Ryan pulled out a small notebook. "I've documented everything from today. Names, specific actions, times, witnesses." He handed it to Dawson. "The pattern is clear, they're systematic about who they target and how. And tomorrow? They've escalated to food throwing today. Based on what you've told me, they'll likely test physical boundaries next." Ryan's expression remained calm. "Troy mentioned something about teaching me the geography behind the gym after last period tomorrow." Dawson looked concerned. "Are you sure you want to follow through with this?" Ryan nodded with quiet determination. "My sensei always taught me that true strength lies in restraint, not aggression. These bullies mistake fear for respect. They've never encountered someone who isn't afraid of them. Just remember, observe, document, and avoid confrontation unless absolutely necessary. I understand, Ryan said, picking up his backpack. But I should warn you, Principal Dawson. They're planning something bigger. Troy kept mentioning making an example of me. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Dawson replied grimly. Be careful tomorrow. As Ryan left through the side door, he pulled his shoulders back into their hunched position and replaced his glasses. In the parking lot, Troy and his friends were keying a teacher's car, laughing as they worked. They didn't notice Ryan watching from the shadows, cataloging every detail in his mind. Tomorrow, Ryan whispered to himself. They learn their first lesson. Fight. 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 Ryan walked away from Troy's taunts for the third time that day, head down, shoulders hunched, the perfect picture of submission. The crowd that had gathered in the cafeteria collectively deflated, disappointed by the non-confrontation. What's wrong, Carter? Scared? Troy called after him, high-fiving Derek. Don't forget, gym class next period. Hope you brought an extra pair of underwear. Ryan ducked into the bathroom, leaned against the sink, and took a deep breath. For a moment, he allowed his real self to surface, shoulders straightening, eyes sharpening, jaw set with determination. He removed his glasses and studied his reflection. Patience, he whispered to himself. The right moment. The bathroom door swung open, and Ryan instantly resumed his meek facade. Hey, Mia said, stepping just inside the doorway. This is the boys' bathroom, but I wanted to warn you, Troy's planning something in gym class. Coach Miller pairs students for wrestling drills, and Troy bribed him to match you two up. Ryan blinked. How do you know this? I overheard them in the hallway. And my brother is on the wrestling team. She hesitated. Maybe you should go to the nurse? Say you're sick? Ryan shook his head. I can't keep running. It's not running, it's survival, Mia insisted. Look, I don't know what you've done to get on their radar so fast, but Troy's never been this fixated on someone before. He's got something to prove. Ryan considered this. His mission wasn't to expose himself prematurely, but if Troy had engineered a direct physical confrontation in class, avoiding it would undermine his purpose. Thanks for the warning, he said, replacing his glasses. But I'll be okay. Mia looked skeptical. Your funeral. The gymnasium smelled of sweat and floor wax, its polished wooden boards reflecting the fluorescent lights overhead. Coach Miller, a barrel-chested former college wrestler with a permanent scowl, blew his whistle as students filtered in. Listen up! Today we're working on basic takedown defense. I'll assign partners based on similar weight classes. He consulted his clipboard with theatrical deliberation. Matthews and Carter. A murmur rippled through the class. Troy cracked his knuckles and smirked at his friends, who snickered in anticipation. Ryan quietly took his place on the blue mat across from Troy, his face expressionless behind his glasses. Basic rules, Coach Miller barked. No punches, no kicks, no submissions. This is takedown practice only. First to pin shoulders for 3 seconds wins. Begin on my whistle. Troy leaned in, his voice low enough that only Ryan could hear. I'm going to enjoy this, new kid. Ryan said nothing, his eyes downcast, seemingly resigned to his fate. The whistle blew. Troy lunged forward with surprising speed for his size, hands outstretched to grapple. Ryan waited until the last possible millisecond, then moved. Not with the awkward dodge of a frightened target, but with the precise footwork of someone who had spent thousands of hours perfecting body mechanics. One moment Troy was about to grab Ryan's shoulders. The next, he found himself off balance, stumbling forward as Ryan simply wasn't where he should have been. A flash of confusion crossed Troy's face. He regained his footing and circled more cautiously. Lucky dodge, he muttered. Ryan maintained his timid posture, but now he was watching Troy through his lashes, calculating. When Troy attacked again, Ryan stepped into the charge instead of away from it. His hands found Troy's wrist and elbow in a textbook counter, using the bully's own momentum to redirect him. Before anyone fully registered what was happening, Troy was airborne. He landed flat on his back with a loud thud that echoed through the suddenly silent gym. Ryan immediately stepped back, eyes wide as if surprised by his own success. 1, 2, 3. Coach Miller counted automatically, then blew his whistle. Pin! Carter wins! For a moment, Troy remained on the mat, winded and stunned. When he finally sat up, his face burned with humiliation. That was... he began. Excellent form, Carter. Coach Miller interrupted, genuinely impressed. Where did you learn that technique? My uncle taught me a little, Ryan mumbled, pushing his glasses up. Just basics. Troy scrambled to his feet, his embarrassment morphing into rage. That was a fluke. Let's go again. Coach Miller shrugged. Fine by me. Ready positions. This time, Troy attacked with fury instead of confidence, abandoning technique for brute strength. Ryan let himself be pushed backwards several steps, making the retreat look clumsy and desperate. Then, just as Troy pressed his advantage, Ryan executed a perfect hip throw that sent Troy tumbling again. The class gasped collectively. Derek and Mason exchanged worried glances. This wasn't part of the script. Beginner's luck. Troy spat as he rose again, though doubt had crept into his voice. By the third match, the entire class had gathered around their mat, all other drills forgotten. Troy was sweating profusely, his frustration growing with each failed attempt. Ryan hadn't thrown a single offensive move, he simply redirected Troy's attacks with minimal effort, always making it appear as though Troy's own aggression was his undoing. After the fifth consecutive pin, Coach Miller blew his whistle. That's enough. Hit the showers. The locker room buzzed with excited chatter. Ryan changed quickly, aware of the glares from Troy's corner. This isn't over. Troy hissed as Ryan passed. Behind the gym. Tomorrow. After school. Ryan nodded meekly and hurried out, but not before hearing Troy's furious planning with his gang. We need to make sure he knows what happens to people who embarrass me, Troy was saying. All of us. No witnesses. Make it look like an accident if teachers show up. I don't know, man, Luke said hesitantly. Did you see how he moved? Maybe we should. What? Back down? Let some nobody make me look weak? Troy's voice dropped dangerously. Tomorrow we show the whole school what happens when someone crosses us. After the final bell, Ryan met with Principal Dawson again, recounting the gym class incident and Troy's plans. I tried to make it look like luck, Ryan explained, but I couldn't let him actually hurt me. You did well, Dawson assured him. It's exactly the first warning I hoped for, showing them there's more to you than meets the eye, but not revealing your full capabilities. They're planning something big tomorrow, Ryan said. Behind the gym. All 5 of them. Dawson nodded soberly. Are you still comfortable proceeding? Ryan's eyes hardened with resolve. This isn't just about exposing their behavior anymore. The way Troy reacted today, he's dangerous. He can't stand being challenged. If it wasn't me, it would be someone else, someone who couldn't defend themselves. Just remember the limits we discussed, Dawson cautioned. Documentation, not confrontation. Ryan smiled slightly. Sometimes the best documentation is a demonstration. As Ryan left, Mia caught up with him in the hallway. How did you do that today? In gym? Do what? Ryan asked, resuming his timid persona. Don't play dumb, she said. Nobody takes down Troy Matthews 5 times in a row by accident. Who are you, really? For a moment, Ryan considered telling her the truth. Instead, he just shrugged. Lucky, I guess. Troy and his friends are planning something, she warned. You should stay away from school tomorrow. I'll be fine, Ryan assured her, then added quietly. Maybe you should make sure you're not behind the gym after school tomorrow. Why? She asked, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Just a feeling, Ryan replied, walking away. Things might get interesting. That night, in his bedroom, Ryan meditated for an hour, centering himself for what was to come. On his desk lay the notebook where he documented every incident, every threat. Tomorrow would be the culmination of his mission, not just gathering evidence, but creating an opportunity for real change. His phone buzzed with a text from Dawson. "Are you sure about tomorrow?" Ryan typed back a simple reply. "Yes. It's time they learn actions have consequences." Word spread through Blackwood like wildfire. By lunch, everyone knew about the confrontation scheduled behind the gym after school. Troy and his crew made no effort to hide their intentions, openly boasting about how they would teach Carter a lesson he'd never forget. "I heard Troy's bringing brass knuckles," a freshman whispered in the lunch line. "I heard he paid some guys from Jefferson High to help," countered another. Mia slid into the seat across from Ryan, who was eating alone. "You need to leave school now," she said urgently. "They're not just going to rough you up, they're planning to put you in the hospital." Ryan calmly continued eating his sandwich. "I appreciate your concern. This isn't a joke," Mia hissed. "Half the school is planning to watch. Troy's turned this into some kind of spectacle to restore his reputation. He's unhinged after what happened in gym class. Maybe it's better this way," Ryan said, his voice subtly different, steadier, more confident. "With everyone watching." Mia studied him, noticing the slight change in his posture. "You're not afraid?" "No," Ryan admitted. "I'm not." "Why?" "You don't stand a chance against all 5 of them." Ryan smiled enigmatically. "Sometimes things aren't what they seem." The final bell rang at 3:15. By 3:20, a crowd had formed a loose semicircle behind the gymnasium, an impromptu arena bordered by the brick wall of the building and a chain-link fence separating the school grounds from the adjacent park. At least 70 students had gathered, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and uncomfortable anticipation. Troy and his 4 lieutenants stood in the center of the space, Troy bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet like a prizefighter. When Ryan appeared at the edge of the crowd, Troy's face split into a predatory smile. "Glad you could make it, Carter," he called. "Wasn't sure you'd have the guts to show." The crowd parted to let Ryan through. He walked with the same hunched posture he'd maintained all week, but there was something different in his eyes, a calm clarity that seemed out of place in someone supposedly walking to his doom. "I didn't want to fight," Ryan said, his voice carrying despite its softness. "I still don't." "Should have thought about that before you made me look bad," Troy sneered. "Hold his arms," he ordered Derek and Mason. As the 2 larger boys moved toward Ryan, the crowd grew eerily quiet. Ryan stood perfectly still, his breathing steady, waiting. When Derek reached for his right arm, Ryan shifted his weight almost imperceptibly. Derek's grasp closed on empty air as Ryan sidestepped with a fluid grace that seemed to surprise even him. "Stay still, freak!" Mason lunged from the other side. What happened next occurred so quickly that many in the crowd would later disagree about the exact sequence. Mason's fist sailed past Ryan's ear as Ryan ducked and pivoted. Somehow, Mason's momentum carried him directly into Derek, sending both boys sprawling in an ungainly tangle of limbs. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Troy's face darkened. "Vince, Luke, don't just stand there!" The remaining 2 attackers moved in more cautiously. Vince circled to Ryan's left while Luke approached from the right. They coordinated their attack, rushing simultaneously. Ryan's response was a blur of precise movement. A slight shift of weight, a turned shoulder, a redirected arm, and suddenly Vince was on the ground, tripped by his own forward momentum. Luke managed to grab Ryan's shirt, but before he could follow through, Ryan executed a perfect wrist lock that caused Luke to release his grip with a pained gasp. The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations. Ryan hadn't thrown a single punch, yet 4 attackers were picking themselves up from the ground, looking dazed and confused. "What the hell are you?" Troy demanded, fury and the first flickers of fear battling for dominance in his expression. Ryan finally straightened to his full height, shoulders back, the meek persona falling away completely. He removed his fake glasses and pocketed them. "Someone who believes strength doesn't mean hurting others," Ryan replied, his voice now calm and assured. Troy's face contorted with rage. With a guttural yell, he charged, fist cocked back for a knockout blow. The crowd gasped collectively. Troy was the school's boxing champion, and his right hook was legendary. Ryan waited until the last possible moment before moving. In one fluid motion, he deflected Troy's punch downward, stepped to the side, and used Troy's momentum to flip him cleanly over his hip. Troy landed with a heavy thud, the wind knocked from his lungs. Before he could recover, Ryan had him in a controlled pin, immobilized but unhurt. "I could have hurt you," Ryan said quietly, "for Troy's ears alone. I chose not to. That's the difference between power and strength." He released Troy and stepped back. The crowd was utterly silent, every eye fixed on the scene in disbelief. Troy staggered to his feet, his face a mask of humiliation and confusion. "This isn't over," he snarled, though the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Actually," came a new voice from the edge of the crowd. "It is." The students parted to reveal Principal Dawson and Vice Principal Torres. Dawson's expression was solemn as he surveyed the scene. "What's going on here?" he asked, though the evidence was plain to see. Nobody spoke. Even Troy and his friends, usually quick with excuses, stood silent, the fight visibly drained from them. "Mr. Matthews, Mr. Carter, my office." "Now." Dawson turned to the crowd. "The rest of you, go home. The show's over." As the students began to disperse, many casting backward glances at Ryan, Mia approached him. "Who are you?" she asked again, this time with wonder rather than suspicion. Ryan smiled. "Just someone who believes in standing up for what's right." In Dawson's office, Troy sat slouched in a chair, alternating between glares at Ryan and nervous glances at the principal. "Before you say anything," Troy began. "Enough," Dawson interrupted. "I know exactly what happened." He looked at Ryan and nodded slightly. "It's time." Ryan stood straighter, all pretense gone. "My name is Ryan Carter. I'm a 5th-degree black belt in Kenpo Karate and a junior national champion. I came to Blackwood High at Principal Dawson's request as part of a disciplinary intervention." Troy's mouth fell open. "What? You set me up?" "No, Troy," Dawson replied calmly. "You set yourself up. For weeks I've watched you and your friends terrorize this school while my hands were tied by bureaucracy and your father's legal threats. Ryan has been documenting everything, the harassment, the threats, the vandalism. Today's incident was just the culmination. You can't prove anything," Troy muttered, though with less conviction than before. Ryan placed his notebook on Dawson's desk. "Actually, we can. Dates, times, witnesses, photographic evidence. Everything." Troy slumped deeper into his chair, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. "So what happens now? Expulsion? Juvenile detention?" Dawson leaned forward. "That depends on you, Troy. This could be the end of your time at Blackwood, or it could be a new beginning." Outside the office window, students lingered in the parking lot, the buzz of conversation animated as they replayed what they'd witnessed. For the first time in months, there was an energy at Blackwood High that wasn't fueled by fear. The school's landscape had shifted dramatically in less than 15 minutes. They just didn't know yet how permanent that change would be. An emergency assembly was called for the following morning. The school buzzed with speculation as students filed into the gymnasium, the scene of Troy's first defeat just days before. Rumors had spread overnight. Some claimed Troy and his gang had been expelled, others insisted they'd been arrested. The truth, when the students saw it, was even more surprising. Troy and his 4 friends sat in chairs on the stage alongside Principal Dawson, Vice Principal Torres, and Ryan Carter. Their expressions ranged from sullen, Derek, to thoughtful, Luke, to openly hostile, Troy. When everyone was seated, Dawson approached the microphone. "Yesterday," he began, his voice echoing in the suddenly quiet gymnasium. "Many of you witnessed an incident behind the school. Rather than letting rumors define what happened, I want to speak directly about it, and about changes coming to Blackwood High." He gestured for Ryan to join him at the podium. Ryan walked forward, his posture now naturally straight, his gait confident. Without the fake glasses and hunched shoulders, he looked like a completely different person. "This is Ryan Carter," Dawson continued. "Some of you know him as the new student who arrived this week. What you don't know is that Ryan is here on a special assignment." A murmur swept through the crowd. "Ryan is a 5th-degree black belt in Kenpo karate and a 3-time junior national champion. He comes from a family that has run a prestigious dojo for 3 generations." At this revelation, dozens of students turned to look at Troy, whose face had reddened with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "For months," Dawson continued, "Blackwood High has faced a serious problem with bullying and intimidation. When conventional approaches proved ineffective, I reached out to Ryan's sensei, an old friend of mine, for help. Ryan agreed to come to our school, posing as a new student, to document the patterns of bullying and help us address them at their root." Vice Principal Torres stepped forward, holding a tablet. "What we discovered was a systematic campaign of intimidation far worse than we had realized. Students afraid to use certain hallways or bathrooms. Teachers being threatened for intervening. Younger students paying protection money to avoid harassment." She tapped the tablet, and a series of photos appeared on the large screen behind them. Troy and his friends vandalizing lockers, cornering younger students, intimidating teachers. The evidence was undeniable. "In most cases," Dawson said gravely, "these actions would result in immediate expulsion and potential criminal charges." Troy's shoulders slumped visibly. His father sat in the front row, his usual arrogant demeanor replaced by grim resignation. "However," Dawson continued, surprising everyone, "that would only address the symptoms, not the cause. We're taking a different approach." He motioned Ryan forward again. "In martial arts, students learn more than just physical techniques. They learn discipline, respect, and the responsibility that comes with power. Ryan hasn't just documented our problems, he's offered a solution." Ryan stepped to the microphone, his voice steady and confident. "True martial arts isn't about beating people up, it's about building people up. It's about channeling energy in positive directions and understanding that with skill comes responsibility." He turned to look directly at Troy and his friends. "These 5 students have shown they have strength, determination, and leadership abilities. They've just been using those qualities destructively. Starting today," Dawson announced, "Blackwood High will implement a comprehensive anti-bullying program that includes a new martial arts club, focused on discipline and respect. Ryan has agreed to stay on as its instructor for the remainder of the year." The gym erupted in excited chatter. Dawson raised his hands for quiet. "As for Troy Matthews, Derek Wilson, Mason Reyes, Luke Chin, and Vince Toretto," he continued when the noise subsided, "they have a choice. Option 1, face the disciplinary and legal consequences of their actions, which would likely include expulsion and juvenile charges." Troy's father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For once, his legal connections couldn't shield his son. "Option 2, Dawson said. "They can become the founding members of the martial arts club, where they'll learn to channel their energy productively. They'll also participate in community service and a restorative justice program with the students they've harmed." He looked directly at the 5 boys. "This isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a chance to redirect your lives before it's too late. The choice is yours, but you must decide now, in front of everyone who has lived in fear of you." An uncomfortable silence fell over the gymnasium. All eyes were on the 5 bullies. Derek was the first to respond, standing slowly. "I'm in," he said quietly. "I want to learn what he knows." He nodded toward Ryan. Luke and Vince exchanged glances, then both stood as well. "Us too." Mason hesitated, looking at Troy. After a moment of internal struggle, he rose. "I'll do it." All eyes turned to Troy, who remained seated, jaw clenched in defiance. His father leaned forward, whispering urgently, but Troy shook his head. Finally, he stood, though his posture remained rigid with resistance. "Fine. Whatever." Ryan approached Troy and extended his hand. "It's not about winning or losing," he said. It's about growing. Troy ignored the outstretched hand. Don't think this changes anything, he muttered. No, Ryan agreed calmly. Only you can change things, Troy. I'm just offering the opportunity. Vice Principal Torres stepped forward. The martial arts club will meet 3 times a week after school. Attendance for these 5 is mandatory, but any student is welcome to join. Additionally, Dawson added, we're implementing a peer mediation program and an anonymous reporting system for bullying incidents. The culture of fear at Blackwood High ends today. As the assembly dispersed, students approached Ryan in waves, some curious, others grateful, many interested in joining the new club. Through it all, Ryan maintained the quiet confidence that was his true nature, answering questions and offering encouragement. In the corner of the gym, Mr. Dawson watched with satisfaction. His unorthodox experiment had worked better than he'd hoped. He caught Ryan's eye across the crowd and gave him a subtle nod of appreciation. Not everyone was celebrating, though. Troy stood apart, watching the scene with smoldering resentment. When their eyes met, Ryan could see that Troy's anger hadn't diminished, it had merely been redirected. The real challenge, Ryan realized, was just beginning. Later, in Dawson's office, Ryan shared his concerns. Troy's not convinced. He's complying to avoid expulsion, but he sees this as humiliation, not opportunity. I expected that, Dawson replied. Change doesn't happen overnight, especially for someone who's built their identity on dominating others. Can you handle it? Ryan nodded thoughtfully. My sensei always said the hardest students often become the best, if you can reach them. He smiled. Besides, I came here to make a difference. Sounds like my job isn't finished yet. As Ryan left the office, Mia was waiting in the hallway. So, Karate Kid, she said with a grin. When do lessons start? Ryan laughed. Tomorrow. Will you be there? Wouldn't miss it, she replied. Someone needs to keep an eye on Troy. I don't trust his sudden compliance. Neither do I, Ryan admitted. But sometimes the hardest challenges are the most worthwhile. As they walked down the corridor, other students nodded respectfully or called out greetings to Ryan. The atmosphere had already changed. Halls that had once felt like danger zones now buzzed with renewed energy. The experiment had just begun, but already Blackwood High felt like a different place. Whether that change would last remained to be seen, but for the first time in months, there was hope in the air. 3 months later, the Blackwood High gymnasium bustled with activity. Focus on your breathing, Ryan called out, walking between the rows. Power comes from within, not just from muscles. At the front of the class, demonstrating for newer students, stood Derek and Vince. Both had taken to martial arts with unexpected enthusiasm. Derek had even started helping Ryan teach the beginners group. Luke worked diligently in the middle rows, his analytical mind perfectly suited to the technical aspects of karate. Beside him, Mason showed impressive progress, his previous aggression now channeled into disciplined movements. And at the back, going through the motions with mechanical precision but little enthusiasm, was Troy. Unlike the others, he remained resistant, complying with requirements, but never fully engaging. After class, Ryan approached him. Your technique is improving, Troy. Troy shrugged, untying his belt. Not like I have a choice. There's always a choice, Ryan replied. Even now, you're choosing to see this as punishment rather than opportunity. Easy for you to say, Troy muttered. You didn't have your entire life turned upside down. No, Ryan agreed. I had mine turned right side up when I discovered martial arts. Before that, I was angry too. Troy looked up, genuinely surprised. You? Ryan nodded. I was bullied pretty severely in elementary school. My parents enrolled me in karate hoping it would help me defend myself. What I found was something much more valuable. Let me guess, Troy said sarcastically. Inner peace? Self-control, Ryan corrected. The understanding that how others treat you doesn't define you, how you respond does. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered in Troy's eyes. Then the walls came back up. Whatever. See you Thursday. As Troy left, Principal Dawson entered from his observation position by the door. Still no breakthrough? He'll get there, Ryan said. He's stubborn, but he's starting to ask the right questions. The change in this school has been remarkable, Dawson observed. Incident reports are down 70%. And I've had 3 parents call specifically to say their kids actually want to come to school now. Ryan smiled. It's a team effort. The martial arts club is just one piece. Indeed, the transformation of Blackwood High extended far beyond the gym. The peer mediation program had resolved dozens of conflicts before they escalated. The anonymous reporting system had identified problems that might otherwise have festered. Even the physical environment had changed. Student artwork now covered walls once marred by graffiti. Most noticeable was the shift in social dynamics. The rigid hierarchy that had placed Troy's gang at the top had dissolved, replaced by more fluid, healthier relationships. Students who had previously kept their heads down now walked the halls with confidence. 2 weeks later, the dojo hosted its first in-school exhibition. Parents, teachers, and students packed the gymnasium to watch demonstrations of kata, sparring, and board breaking. Our final demonstration today, Ryan announced to the audience, is a sparring match between 2 of our most advanced students. Derek stepped onto the mat, bowing respectfully to the crowd. There was a murmur of anticipation as everyone wondered who his opponent would be. Facing Derek will be. Ryan paused. Troy Matthews. A hush fell over the gym as Troy emerged from the back, his expression unreadable. The history between these 2 former partners in bullying was well known. They bowed to each other and took their stances. At Ryan's signal, they began. What followed surprised everyone. Troy fought with perfect form, his movements controlled yet powerful. There was none of his former wild aggression, just disciplined, focused energy. Derek matched him technique for technique. When Troy finally scored the winning point with a perfectly timed counter, the crowd erupted in applause. Derek bowed to Troy, genuine respect in his eyes. After a moment's hesitation, Troy bowed back. As the exhibition concluded, Troy approached Ryan. You set that up, didn't you? Paired me with Derek? Ryan nodded. You were ready. You both were. I wanted to beat him, Troy admitted. But not like before. Not to dominate him. I just wanted to prove something to myself. That's the difference, Ryan said. Fighting to prove something to yourself rather than to others. Later, as Ryan was packing up equipment, Troy reappeared, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. My dad wants to know if you give private lessons, he said abruptly. He was impressed. Ryan raised an eyebrow. I thought you were counting the days until this punishment ended. Troy looked away. Maybe it's not all bad. Besides, Luke says you're teaching some advanced stuff after the regular sessions. Ryan suppressed a smile. I think we could arrange something. As Troy turned to leave, he paused. Hey, Carter, thanks. For not giving up on me, even when I was being a jerk. That's what real strength is about, Ryan replied. Not giving up on people. The following Monday, Principal Dawson called Ryan to his office. The board is amazed by the turnaround, Dawson said. They've approved funding to make the martial arts program permanent. We'd like you to stay on as instructor next year. Ryan looked surprised. I was only supposed to be here temporarily. Plans change, Dawson smiled. So does Blackwood High. Thanks to you. That afternoon, in a moment that would have been unimaginable 3 months earlier, Troy Matthews stood up in the cafeteria when he saw a junior shoving a freshman. Hey, Troy called, his voice carrying across the room. We don't do that here anymore. The junior turned, ready to argue, then recognized who had spoken. Troy Matthews, once the school's most feared bully, now wearing the black belt he'd earned through months of dedicated training. The junior backed off immediately. Sorry. My bad. Troy helped the freshman gather his scattered books. You okay? The younger boy nodded, wide-eyed. Thanks, Troy. No problem, Troy replied. If anyone gives you trouble, the martial arts club meets every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You should come by. As Troy returned to his lunch table, now occupied by a diverse group including former victims and former accomplices, he caught Ryan watching from across the cafeteria. They exchanged a small nod of mutual respect. Later that day, Ryan stood in Dawson's office, looking out at the courtyard where his journey at Blackwood had begun. Students moved freely, laughing and talking. No fear, no intimidation, just the normal energy of high school life. "When you first called me," Ryan said to Dawson, "I thought this was just about exposing bullies. I never expected to make such a difference," Dawson finished. "That was the hope all along. Not just to stop the negative, but to create something positive in its place." As Ryan watched, he spotted Troy crossing the courtyard. A smaller student dropped his books and instinctively flinched as Troy approached. But instead of the torment that would have followed months ago, Troy simply helped gather the books and continued on his way. "Your mission is complete," Dawson said. "But your legacy will continue." Ryan smiled. "The mission is never really complete. There's always another lesson to teach, or to learn." Outside, the final bell rang, and students streamed toward the gym, not running from something, but running towards something. Toward growth, toward discipline and respect. Toward a new beginning for Blackwood High.